Hi everyone, and it was wonderful to be here. And I think most importantly to end the day almost with the really, really important conversation around investment or funding. We've heard this so many times since arriving in Copenhagen. It was talked about last night. We heard it again talked about throughout the day today. This is so critical, and we know it's just not happening enough. There are some amazing stats out there quite broadly if you look beyond the fashion industry, if we look at the investment community itself. Sustainability is reportedly considered a key factor in investment today. 39% of investors have already reportedly invested in it in some way or another. Now, of course, what we're looking at there tends to be very broad institutional investment decisions. And when you bring that down to the level that we need, however, we know that investment in sustainability in our industry particularly is really very limited. So I want us to use this time, this quite short amount of time, to really dig into a variety of different angles on that and look at the why particularly, and also the action points of how we can try and evolve it forward with these expert voices that we have here with us on the stage today. So I'm going to dive straight in. Let's start with the most obvious question. Nikhil, I want to come to you. In your experience, what are the main reasons as to why the fashion industry is not receiving enough investment relative to sustainability today?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here representing as a manufacturer. And, as a manufacturer, as a family business as well, I listened to the Crown Prince's definition today about what sustainability is. It's about the next generation. As a family business, that's exactly what we're doing. We're thinking about the next generation. So sustainability is very much part of our DNA. And when I look at some of the challenges that we have as a manufacturer and where the stopgap is in really sort of sustainability, it really is in terms of who pays for it. And I think the element of where as a manufacturer, we obviously want to be sustainable. We are sustainable. We're doing a lot for sustainability. We want to make sure that we have the customer base and remain competitive. And I think this is where the challenge is. A lot of the sustainability innovation is happening within the supply chain. It's happening trickling down to our supply chain. But the funding of it is sometimes a challenge because we want to make sure that we have a business going forward. I mean, there's an element of risk. We can invest in sustainability, maybe for one particular customer, but will that make us uncompetitive with another customer? So I think there's an element of, we've talked about collaboration, we've talked about, and I'm sure you'll hear that in this conversation, but I think that's really the risk factor is probably the key component for us as a manufacturer, because it's something we want to do, but being sustainable is this paradox, because we want to make sure we want to continue for the next generation, but in order to do that, we also need to have a business going forward.
Burcu, to throw that over to you, from your perspective as a bank fundamentally, who should pay for it? Is it you?
Yeah. I would just echo Nikhil's comments on the collective effort here as well, because, and we discussed throughout the day up until this moment, I think it's one of the benefits of going a little bit last in the panel, where you get the chance to hear everyone and reflect on, a little bit wrap up what's been discussed. But I think it's a combination of public, private, investors, us. I think I do represent obviously the financial institution industry here and HSBC, and we definitely recognize the responsibility that we have within this conversation and within this business imperative. And as a financial institution, you're in the middle of businesses, government, public, investors, and you're the link. And we definitely understand the responsibility that we have in directing the capital flows, as well as in the responsibility we have to be able to drive all of us into a low-carbon society in the future. And to me, the answer to that is it's a collective effort. And we within HSBC, we have made a group commitment back in November 2017. The reason why I say November is because it's been less than almost 2 years for sustainable financing by 2025 for $100 billion US. And we already achieved 28.5 billion of that commitment. So there are already a lot happening in the industry, and we as HSBC, as a financial institution, are there to support. And we want to see fashion industry to recognize our role, our importance, and our support more.
Can we maybe take a step back for just a moment, assuming most likely that the majority of people in the room are not finance experts. I know I'm not a finance expert. I presume some people in here are hopefully getting better at talking to their finance people. But from your side of things, a lot of the time when we hear a lot of this conversation, as I said, a lot of it is around that institutional investment side of things, or the more philanthropical side of things, which we will come to as well. But I'd love to hear, what are the options that are out there from financing? Because I think there's not necessarily a broad enough understanding of the different things that could be gone after. And then as a second point to that question, are we seeing the fashion industry do it? And if not, why not?
So let me take the first one first. I think that's a brilliant question. It's the proposition that we can offer, and the vast majority, variety of what's available in terms of the financing solution is not limited to asset management or investor class. It's really across green bonds, green loans, sustainable supply chain finance, just to name a few. From what we see in the fashion industry, and we discussed it up until this time quite a lot, where it's one of the highest polluting industries, and there are lots of stats supporting that. We discussed the Pulse score today, and the widening gap between the industry growth, which definitely indicates that there is not the accelerated action, or definitely call for action, but not the accelerated action that follows. We want to see more. What we want to encourage is for everyone that's in the room with their different hats on, really engage. There might be some CFOs and finance and procurement professionals sitting in the audience, but we want to really engage, and we want to really ask them to challenge their banking partner, and HSBC, obviously with my HSBC hat on, talk to their finance, treasury, procurement, sustainability professionals, and really start a discussion for a co-creation with our clients, with the businesses, with the private investors, because this is collective work, and we really need to be over-communicative, over-engaging as we do this across various parts of the organization, within the financial institution as well as within the corporate.
And Precious, to come to you, to take that sort of even down another level, of course, there is the role of private investors, of which you spend a lot of your time in. So maybe can you share a little bit about that and what that looks like in your work?
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to be in Denmark for the first time. I was amazed at how many bikes are out here. It was so different for me coming from South Africa. So I wear two hats. On the one hand, I belong to a family that started its own philanthropy activities 20 years ago. My husband and I started our own family foundation, and we're part of a global group called the Giving Pledge, which are families that have committed to helping end poverty and deal with sustainable development goals globally. As part of the work that we do, we focus, and you all heard Paul Polman speaking very eloquently around SDGs. So we focus on education, making education accessible, especially to poor communities. We focus on health, but in particular for this conference, we focus on women, ensuring that they are part of the discussion. When we're talking about sustainability, it's not just sustainability in the narrow sense of the word. It's got to be about how we include women and people that are also have been, left outside of the economic system. And very importantly, we have just committed, together with other philanthropists, on looking at global energy and resources. We're looking at climate action. We're looking at the environment. The role of philanthropists is important in this discussion because this is long-term investing. This is capital that is patient. Philanthropists are able to invest in innovation. For instance, we've got many social entrepreneurs from Africa that we support. And just to give you an example, one of them has been looking at how we can preserve local knowledge and local art. It's a designer called Laduma, and he comes from the Eastern Cape in South Africa, and part of his culture, which is Xhosa, They have very unique, specific patterns, not very dissimilar to Misoni, but very, very particular to this tribe. And he uses wool that comes from the area in the Eastern Cape to make yarn and to make his knitwear. So it's a combination of preserving local knowledge and local tradition, as well as ensuring that he can use the supply chain. So as philanthropists, we are able to invest in innovation, but we're also able to invest in scaling projects that seem to be successful. We're able to invest in implementation of the projects themselves, and we're able to invest in advocacy work. So, for instance, with my manufacturer friend here, philanthropists can, and we're already beginning to talk about how we can invest in technology to assist in the industry. And then my other hat, of course, is I aggregate young fashion designers on the continent, throughout the continent, and we help them to ensure that they do not make the mistakes that have been made in the West and as well as in Europe.
One of the words I think that's coming up here and has come up a lot throughout today, and I remember last year as well, is of course collaboration. You know, you've all referenced different partners and people that you're working with. Nikhil, to come to you, who are the other actors that need to be involved to realize a more sustainable business model, and importantly, driving the investment side of it?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, in talking to what, referring to what Precious said, I think there's a gap in the sense that manufacturers need to be part of the whole process, right? At the end of the day, when we're looking at commercializing technology, a lot of the technology is developed in the West, and I think we need to understand where we can be involved in some of that technology, because at the end of the day, it's got to be commercialized. I talked about risk. And there's got to be an element of the long-term versus short-term, because that's what this is all about. We're not sure whether it's going to be successful, but at the end of the day, it's for the future, and we have to take this as an element of risk, but we need to share the risk. I mean, I think there's some really good examples, there's some really good examples of collaborative efforts in the last couple of years. I mean, I've been involved with the SAC, I'm on the board of the SAC, and I think developing the Higg Index has created that tool of measurement, which is one of the issues we had. We didn't know how to measure sustainability. I think we now have that. And another project that I'm very passionate about is the Social and Labour Convergence Project, which we've talked about, I think referred to earlier today, which at the end of the day really looks at business value. There's a clear business value to that project in the sense that we are now seeing the reduction of audit. And I think statistically, we as the SLCP will sort of generate over $130 million of savings for 2023 to be put back into the supply chain. So there's a great story there. And we have that story, but at the end of the day, we also need maybe sort of financial institutions, other actors. And I think the opportunity also lies in the fact that within our industry, if we can succeed in our industry, we can take a lot of these tools to other industries. So I think from an investor point of view, it's quite exciting because, it's quite an exciting time to be, because I think there's so much innovation going on now. We can really take it forward.
And from your perspective, I mean, I know you think about collaboration a lot as well. Are you seeing it applicable truly in this industry? And how do you want to see that driven more? I mean, how can it happen in a way that people can, ultimately get more of your financing, I suppose?
Yeah, I think the collaboration is a key point here, and the co-creation, which I really want to emphasize. I think we all are on a journey, and we already discussed that this is not a trend, not a theme anymore. It's a business imperative, but it's a journey that's evolving, and there will be a little bit like experimenting, exploring along the way. And the collaboration is quite key to get the diversity of thought, the experiences with all of our different hats that are involved. I just want to come back to the measurement point, if I may, as well, on the Higgs, because for a financial institution or for the financial industry, the measurement, the accuracy and the transparency around the sustainability matrix and the ratings are quite important for us to be able to develop the right financing solutions that are fit for purpose, so we can collaborate in the right way as well. And it's great to see that there are some developments or some good progress over the past couple of years on the Higgs within the fashion industry. But coming back to our HSBC commitments and the pledges that we made throughout those commitments, one of the pledges that we make is to adopt the principles of the task force on climate-related financial disclosures. And when we look at the reality, this is beyond financial, that's across all industries, maybe only 10% of issuers or investors are actually aware of it. I think we definitely need more. There is more work to be done on that. And if I take a step back and were to break down the different players within that collaborative effort around buyers, suppliers, and us, like the financial institutions, for the buyers, it's a great business case. There is a great business case because that just kind of provides all those measurements and everything we talked about, just provides the ratings for the future, and it just makes the progress much more justifiable and visible. For the suppliers, they become more agile. They remain in the game. They are more future-proof. They will be seen more progressive. And for the banks, it will help for us to develop the right financing solutions. So really want to emphasize the co-creation and the collaboration piece.
I want to come back to the measurement piece a little bit in a moment in terms of sort of obviously measuring the business model. But Precious, just quickly to you on that collaboration side of things. One of the areas that hasn't really been referenced, and I presume is a big part of this, and you have experience with, is of course working with government and different trade organisations as well. How important do you see that those particular bodies in terms of playing a role in this?
Well, I think it's very important. Like it's been said earlier on. Nobody can solve these problems on their own. Definitely government, business has deep pockets, but there's other actors that need to come in to help solve problems. And we use this multi-stakeholder partnership wherever we do our projects. We work with governments. We are able to advocate for certain policy changes, for instance, because we have no agenda. Our big agenda as a philanthropic organization is to ensure that we can make the lives of the poor better. That is our primary objective. So we're able to engage with all these stakeholders. We also work, speak to trade unions. We speak to brand owners. We speak to manufacturers also to try and get a common vision and common goals around particularly issues of sustainability. But what I wanted to raise in terms of brands and maybe companies that want to invest, and this is coming from a perspective of a developing nation, it is very important that companies that come and invest in Africa, in India, use the same standards that you talk about. The commonly used one also is the ESG, environment, society, and governance. Those standards should be used in the countries that these companies are investing in. I think that is very important because then we avoid instances like what happened in Bangladesh and elsewhere in the world. On the African continent, the people that are getting affected most by climate change, are the very poor. We've just seen 2 years ago droughts in Cape Town. We've seen the cyclone in Mozambique. We've seen torrential rains in the area of Durban along the east coast of Africa. So these are people who really cannot even help themselves. So it's very important that issues around, dumping of material on developing nations should be done in such a way that we also empower them, ensure that they can participate in recycling and reusing, repurposing of garments that come from the East or the West. I think that's very important in this whole debate also.
And obviously we don't have a brand representative per se on this panel today. I mean, to any of you really, how do you think brands can be more incentivized to invest themselves, as we said, in different areas of the supply chain, but also in innovation? We've talked about that a lot, obviously a lot of it here over these couple of days. We know R&D is so big in other industries in terms of the brands themselves directly investing in it and obviously creating it themselves, and that's very limited in our industry. How do we think? How can we enable this to any of you?
Well, I mean, I think we're already seeing, collaboration with manufacturers and brands in certain initiatives, and I think that needs to probably, just improve. I mean, intensify. I think we all need to be working together. I think sometimes we as manufacturers have been the lost link. And I think we're now beginning to, and as I mentioned earlier, some of the best innovation is actually happening down the supply chain. So I think we need to really sort of start working together. I mean, I shouldn't also forget the second and third tier factories as well. We need to start thinking about how we can engage them into this whole innovation, because it's in our interest, as I say, it's in our interest to have the whole supply chain being sustainable, not just a few. So I think it's important that we start engaging them. And as I say, we're all willing to work together to be able to do that. But I think continuing to test out the innovation within the supply chain, getting us involved in these conversations, and yeah, I mean, that's really the way forward.
So it sounds like collaboration, keeps coming up obviously as the biggest buzzword here in terms of making this a reality. But just to go back to the measurement side quickly before we have to end. We talk about this in terms of the need for it to prove the business case, but as we heard this morning, of course, there is that huge challenge around the fact that we are, of course, measured at large, usually by quarterly results. And what we need here, obviously, is faith in those long-term results in terms of, experimenting with the innovations, obviously having that certain element of risk. How, and Burcu, maybe this is to you, how can we balance the practicalities of this in terms of proving that there is actually going to be those returns in the future?
I think we need to that comes back to maybe to the communication around the good stories as well, because there is, and this is an answer a little bit beyond the fashion industry, but there are good cases happening. Just a couple of weeks ago, we with an HSBC Group, we just announced a deal with a large US retailer to support them, to support many of their businesses actually within their supply chain in achieving their sustainability objectives with improved access to trade finance. There are lots of things that are already happening, and if we can maybe be a little bit more over-communicated about the good cases and about the good examples that we have around and how certain things are being done as we're on this journey and experimenting and a little bit exploring. Because in some of the propositions that we have, we can easily see that it's slightly beyond proof of concept. There is a little bit more, the business case is all there for all of them, but we can almost kind of scale a little bit further. But some we're also exploring and we're trying to get beyond proof of concept. I would just suggest to be over-communicative around good cases and just further engagement and being really inclusive in these times.
I mean, I emphasize that completely because I think we live in an industry where we always talk about the negatives. And I think there's some amazing positive stories out there. I mean, we just actually, declared ourselves net zero on GHG emissions from energy, which is a great achievement. But, we've got to talk about it. But I think there's some great stories out there and we need to really talk. And I think it'll also encourage other investors to come into the industry if we talk about the positives. So I think it's a great action point to work on.
So to end with the 60 seconds, time is up, but we'll take 60 seconds really quickly to end. From each of you, I'd love to hear, for everyone in the audience that doesn't necessarily work on that side of the business specifically, what action, what takeaway can they take from this conversation today in terms of something that they can go back home with to help drive this side of what is needed for sustainability to be more of a reality? Yeah. Precious, I'll come to you first.
For myself, I'm sure most of you have read the book, The Lorex. I would like to urge each one of us to really care deeply about the issues of sustainability and go beyond just talking and commit and do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of initiatives out there at the moment. So I think it's consolidating multi-sector collaboration with clear goals for the future of sustainability in our industry.
I would really like for everyone, regardless of the hat that they are wearing, representing their organization or company, to really go back, engage with their treasurers, finance professionals, procurement, sustainability professionals, to really challenge them, to ask them to challenge actually their banking partner to be able to co-create and to find out financing solutions to drive all of us into a more sustainable future.
Great. Sounds like good conversations for next week. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.